Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you guys stopping by, taking a look at the game I have to show you here between Wesley So and Ding Liren. And I figured I'd go back a little bit. I take this from the Skilling Open. As you guys know, Wesley So did win that. So I figured I'd go ahead and just cover one of the games that I didn't cover from that. And of course, as I always say at the end of the video, I will have the answer to the previous chess puzzle, and I'll have a brand new puzzle for you for those die-hard, gotta have it chess fans. Now, for those of you that appreciate my content, go ahead and subscribe and like, and leave me comments and everything. So before you go any further, hit the subscribe button. Very much appreciated for you guys. So yeah, if you guys are ready, let's go ahead and jump into this game and see what we have. All right, so we have D4. We got knight to F6. We got C4, E6, knight to C3, and we have bishop to B4. And so we have the Nimzo Indian. That's one of the handful of chess openings that people love to say. The Nightdorfs and the Sicilians and the Grunfelds and all of that stuff. The Nimzo Indian is part of that vernacular, right? So we see queen to C2. And we see castles by black. So we have E4, D5, and we have E5. So knight comes to E4, and we have knight to F3. Of course, if we see a trade here, you can just go ahead and safely take back with the B pawn. It's all well and good. So we have C5. And as you guys hear me say a lot, anytime you have a nice pawn center established, your goal as the opposite player is going to be to try to chip away at that as much as possible. And then especially when you have your own nice little pawn center, your opponent's going to be trying to chip away at that, as much as possible. So, D5 and C5 perfectly do that, just completely just disrupts everything that white has going on here. Following up, we have bishop to D3, hitting a double attack on that knight there. And so we see C takes D4. Because as you can see, there was some pretty immediate action that needed to be taken by black because, if not, the bishop takes the knight, pawn takes, and then queen takes. So you're going to be winning the pawn here. So we have knight takes D4 and knight to D7. And we have bishop F4 and queen comes to H4. We see G3. Now, of course, to see like a little side variation, some of you guys might have looked at the position here and thought, maybe it'd be nice to, just attack the queen with the bishop. The only really move that's going to hold this pawn as well as attack the bishop is going to be bishop to G3. And it seems like it does attack the queen. And then, of course, after, knight takes, the pawn can take and you have the queen hit again. So it seems like it kind of holds everything together. But unfortunately, if we just go back a touch here, the main thing in the position that you need to be paying attention to as white is the fact that this knight is undefended. And it seems like there's a really big disconnect between the queen and this knight over here. But as you guys will see in a couple of moves, it will be a big difference. So we would see knight takes G3, and then after, if you were to just take back simply with the pawn, you would be dropping that knight there. So that's where it becomes a problem. And so the most logical thing for you to do would be to retreat the knight back to F3, attacking the queen. A nice little intermezzo or what we call Zwitch and Zug move. And the queen would probably go to F5 or H5, and so we'd see F takes G3, knight takes E5, and now you're not down an entire piece here, but you are down a pawn, and you have a lot of threats coming, and then also this king is dead set in the middle of the board, so that's definitely not a variation that you want to go down. So like I said, we had queen to H4, and then we saw G3. Recognizing that we have those problems. So, making sure that we have this, covered here. And we are still in theory. So this is, these are lines that we've gone down, plenty of times before. And so we saw queen to H5. And so we see castle as white. And we see G5. Simply just trying to remove the defender of this pawn so we can just win it outright. And so we see pawn takes D5. With the clear intention, we're not pinned anymore here. And so, let me move this a touch here. Bang. Okay, so we're not pinned anymore here, so we can freely move this knight wherever we want. You know, this is a very real threat of just removing the knight, you know, altogether. And so c takes d5 makes that a reality here. So we have bishop takes c3, pawn takes c3, and we have pawn takes d5. And so we see bishop back to e3. And so coming back to this position here, if you want to pause the video real quick and see what white actually had as an alternative move, it's roughly about the same as bishop retreat. Either bishop back to, you know, bishop back to d2 or bishop back to e3. It's roughly the same. It's just an alternate variation. So I don't want you guys thinking that, you know, bishop retreat was the only move. So I'm curious how many of you guys would see this nice little, you know, I guess in-betweener move, even realizing that your bishop is attacked. So like I said, if you want to go ahead and pause it real quick, see if you could find the alternate move in the position, go ahead and take a look here. All right, cool. So for those of you that, you know, recognize your bishop was attacked, but you had like a counter attack situation, you would have found bishop takes e4. Now bishop takes e4 as well as bishop retreating was a legitimate alternate move. And you probably go down line similar like this. So we'd see pawn takes e4. You would throw in another intermezzo with e6, just counter attacking that knight. And so pawn would take f4, you take on d7, but then black would take on g3. And of course, with the immediate threat of checkmate here. And so we have to make sure that we guard against that, of course. So we have pawn takes g3, and after bishop takes d7, we have queen takes e4. And, you know, you can see that the position is fairly equal. I mean, you do have a knight as opposed to a bishop in this open position. But, you know, the pawn structures are fairly similar. You know, still a fairly even game from what we had. And so, like I said, we had bishop back to e3. And then so we have knight takes e5. We have f3. And so knight to c5, we have bishop to f5, getting that bishop out of danger there. And so we see knight to e6, just blocking. And we see g4, and this is actually the novelty of the game. So this is the first time this position has been reached. I believe the move in the past was rook a to e1. And that's been played 2 times. And like I said, this g4 move has been played never. But it's pretty legit idea. I mean, you're just trying to, you know, bounce this queen somewhere else and kind of get it out of your kitchen a little bit. And so we see queen to h6. You know, the queen has to hold on to this pawn because if you just simply remove the knight, however you take, you're just going to be able to, you know, attack that g pawn here. And so we see rook a to e1. And so knight takes d4, bishop takes d4. And we see knight to c6. So bishop to c5, getting a little counter attack on that rook. And so we see rook to d8, bishop to e7. And kind of forcing the issue because, you know, of course you can't go back here with the rook because you're going to be running into, you know, bishop takes d5, just winning the rook outright. So we definitely don't want those tactics flying here. So we see knight takes e7, rook takes e7, bishop takes f5, and then we see queen takes f5. And so we have queen to g6, and queen takes g6, h takes g6, and we have f4. And basically both players have been following basically the computer suggestions. So neither player is really outplaying the other in this position. You know, they're in positions where they do kind of need to make only moves. And, you know, so these players are very strong. You know, Wesley So and Dean Liren are both pretty much finding the computer suggested moves. So that's just a testament to how strong they play the game. And so we see d4, f takes g5, d takes c3, and we see rook f takes f7, and we see c2. And of course, you know, if we don't do something drastic, immediate, this pawn is just going to promote, and then it is all she wrote. So we see rook to g7 with check, king to h8, rook to h7 with check. We see king to g8, rook e to g7 with check, king to f8. We see rook to c7, defending against the pawn here, and also setting up a nice little checkmate in case, you know, black tries to play here. That's just going to be checkmate on 1. So we see rook to g8 defended against that. So rook h to g7 with check, king to h8, rook to h7 with check, king to g8, rook h to g7 check, king to h8, and we see rook to h7 and king to g8. And we have a draw by repetition. So they have repeated moves, and that is a draw. And so, you know, pretty strong game. But like I said, I mean, Wesley So did win the Skilling Open. So he was the champion. And so for those of you guys out there that want to see these chess puzzles, this was a chess puzzle I gave you guys last time. And like I said, the answer was kind of given to you already a little bit because it was almost identical to the other one I gave. Even though this one is considered to be a intermediate level. But we do have queen takes h3 with check, you know, forcing the king down with king takes h3. We see knight to e3, discovering attack on the king with this bishop here, preventing it from being able to back up. So we see king down to h4, and we see knight to g2, check, king to g5, and we have rook to f5 with check, king to g4, and we see h5, forcing the king back to h3, and then we see rook to f2 with checkmate, because that does discover a mate, a check with the bishop here. And so going to this next one here, this one is also a decoy, and it is the hard decoy. It's a pretty complicated one. It's not very long, but it's definitely tough to find all the moves in this one. Yeah, like I said, there is that. I appreciate you guys stopping by. Like I always say, subscribe, like, leave me comments. Let me know how you like everything, and I appreciate you stopping by. And I will see you guys next time. All right, appreciate it.